She's in the hospital. They've done tests. We're just waiting for results. It's like 4 a.m. We're asleep. Some nurse that we've never met walks in our room, cuts the lights on bright, begins yelling my mother's name, waking her up, and says, good morning. I am so-and-so. You're at so-and-so hospital, and you have cancer, right? And she yells this to a woman who is sound asleep. Now, Tom, understand, we have received no results from any official test. We have spoken to 0 doctors. All my mother has done has been admitted because they have found a mass.
The business of healthcare is hard, creating a badlands of terrain that is difficult to navigate. Some think the most brilliant minds in business are on Wall Street. They are wrong. The most brilliant minds are in healthcare. They have to be to thrive and survive. This podcast explores concepts in leadership, management, sales, and negotiation with those brilliant minds. The Healthcare Badlands podcast is generally planned, but unscripted, unedited, and uncut, so you get the honest and unfiltered experience. Your host is Dr. Tom McDougall, a 30-year veteran of healthcare with 23 years of hospital CEO experience. His guests are carefully selected experts from across the industry. They offer insights, expertise, and some great real-life, often hilarious stories. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the Healthcare Badlands podcast. I'm really excited today. We have a guest that is joining us as Brandon Matthews. Brandon's a little bit different than our typical guests on this podcast, but I'm really interested in what he has to share. While we usually are focusing on healthcare leaders in our organizations, Brandon is a culture coach. And he has his own podcast called Mind Your Business. And I follow him on social media, and I find a lot of his content really interesting, really fascinating. So, Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Tom, thank you for having me. What an honor to be a part of what you're doing. Thank you for leading the way and making change in the healthcare industry.
Well, it's my honor. I'm having a ball doing this. This is fantastic. But I want to jump right in, Brandon, because I know you, and you have a healthcare story. And I want you to talk about that healthcare story, how it impacted you, and what you learned from this experience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking about that because it is personal and I am passionate about it. Healthcare is something that is common to every single one of us. Thank God we have such a great the great resources that we have in healthcare for all the different needs that we have. But I think everyone would agree that we've probably all had a less than stellar experience in the healthcare industry. And I think there's many reasons for that. But for me personally, in 2001, my mother, who was completely healthy in every possible way, other than she had glioblastoma, which was a rare brain cancer. And the journey to discovering that was obviously, like anyone else who's walked through something like this, very difficult. And so, you're left with so many questions. You're left with so many emotions and feelings of how is this happening? What are we going to do? You have no idea the specifics about what you're dealing with, the type of cancer and what are the outcomes. And so walking through all of this with her, really, it highlighted so many of the weaknesses, the pain points that we have in the healthcare industry. From being someone who's on the other side of the unknowns, leaning on the experts to walk you through, to guide you. And there's so many elements that are, that are important, from empathy to understanding, to communication, to clarity, to care, the human side of healthcare. And so from my experience, I feel like, Tom, that's one of the things that was missing the most was the humanity of the healthcare. And so with my mom, oftentimes I felt like, I was having to be the main provider. Oftentimes I would find that doctors or nurses, the healthcare professionals would be asking me more questions than I was prepared to give answers to. Navigating.
Give me an example of that. So that's something I want our listeners to understand, because quite frankly, probably a lot of our listeners are so separated from the actual patient care
Yeah.
we don't hear some of these things. So give me
Sure.
an example of when, maybe the communication lacked this humanity.
Yeah. Well, I think here's what I believe happens. I believe that in most industries, we are taught customer service. We are talked about the customer experience. However, in healthcare, it's about the healthcare itself. It's about the outcome, and not so much about the experience of the customer, so to speak. So for me, for example, as I'm navigating now becoming a caretaker to my mother, who is now on 15 different medications that have to be timed and have to be the right amount some you have food with, some you don't, some make you drowsy, all these different things. So I'm managing all of this, plus trying to monitor different things that we were given as for sort of checkpoints for her health. And then you go to a doctor's appointment and you walk in and you fill out the same forms over and over and over. And then you go through the same steps and are asked the same questions over and over and over. And then the doctor, the same one that you met with the last time, asks you what medication she's on, how often is she taking it, what are the impacts, all of the same information that I am as the patient, the caretaker going, didn't you write this down? Didn't you assign this, the prescriptions? Aren't you the one kind of, guardrailing this care for my mother? But on the other side, you feel like you're being asked more questions than you are being given answers. So I felt like a lot of times I'm having to bring clarity to all of the caretakers as opposed to them bringing clarity to me as I'm
How
trying
did
to
you
take care of
take
my mother.
that, though? Did you perceive it as a lack of preparedness for that office visit for your mom, or was
On
it
the
a
back,
lack of interest? Because there's two different sides to that.
it just makes me feel like a case number rather than a person.
That makes sense.
And I think that's the most powerful secret weapon that a healthcare provider can have, is to treat an individual like a person. I think it would be good for every healthcare provider just to slow down for about 30 seconds. And when interacting with a patient, just slow down for just a moment and don't think so much about what's on the clipboard or who's in the room that, you've got 50 patients lined up you have to get to. And so you're checking off sort of these checkbox answers and questions, all the things that you have to do. Just slow down for just a moment and see a son who's taking care of his mother, see a sick woman, see people who are confused, who are scared, who are nervous, see us as people. So it sort of comes across as, we're just another, check mark on the clipboard. I didn't really feel like I was receiving genuine care, that they knew exactly who we were. And I understand reasons why, but it doesn't change the way it makes you feel.
Yeah, and I know you're not saying that the healthcare provider doesn't care.
That's right.
I know you're not saying that. They do care. We all know
That's right.
that. So that's not the discussion here. But
That's
the
right.
way information is being communicated gives that feel.
That's right.
So, you as a culture coach, as an expert in the communication side, what would you have liked to have seen different? And I want you to focus in not on time. Okay,
That's
because
right.
there's a lot of research that shows that you can spend the exact same amount of time with a patient and a caregiver, exact same amount of time, but your approach can be just, night and day in
That's
terms
right.
of how it's perceived.
I think so. One of the most, I think, impactful things, and this is so simple, but it's true for every person and in every industry. Just hearing your name is very relational and it's very comforting. If I say your name, it is a personal connection. You have recognized who I am. And so when someone walks into a room, especially in healthcare, when it's a high demand, and I do want to echo what you said, I know that they care. And I am so appreciative of the healthcare. And that's why I'm passionate about this, because I just want to amplify their care and their effort in what they do to give the best experience. So number one, I think a healthcare professional just to walk in the room and to greet you by name. Hello, it's Tom. It's good to see you today. I hope you're doing good. I'm glad we have a chance to take a look at your records and see how you're doing and make sure that we're taking the best care possible for you. The second thing I would say is to listen, is to slow down and really listen to what the patient is saying. Listen to how they feel. Listen to the things that are, I understand that there are certain things that a doctor is looking for, a healthcare provider is looking for, that they know are going to be effects of medicine or medications. And they're so accustomed to this that they forget that for the individual, they're experiencing this for the first time, and that this is uncharted waters for them. So I think if they don't skip straight to the solution, but just listen to the problem. Most people, and this is so foundational, but most people just want to know that they're being heard and that their concerns are being received, that they're being listened to, their fears, their health, all of these different things. So number one, that personal connection of just looking them in the eye. How are you doing today? Call them by name. Take a moment to listen to them. And then I think validate whatever it is that they feel or what they say. It takes just a moment to say, hey, I hear you. And if I were sitting in your shoes, I would feel the exact same way. But I want to reassure you that I'll talk with 50 patients after you today. And these are very common things that we see. And so here's our plan of action to take care of where you are today and what you're experiencing. And so this is the simplicity to me of just the number of appointments and things that you go through. And if everyone just treated you like a human, like an individual, like a person that matters, by just taking some of those very simple strategies, I think it goes a long way in bringing value and importance to the person.
This episode is sponsored by CO Management Solutions, a revenue cycle company you may not have heard of, but you need to hear this. There is little healthcare organizations can do about inflation-related expenses, but you can make sure you're collecting 100% of your revenue you have earned. CO uses AI and the latest technology paired with an efficient team to aggressively collect your hard-earned revenue at an attractive commission. Start today with a free analysis of what you are leaving uncollected and recover that revenue quick with CO. For more information, visit coms.com. That is SCIOMS.com. Well, and you're an extremely intelligent, educated person. So I'm going to make an assumption. I want to find out whether or not I'm right. Did you Google all of this before you went to see the doctors? Did you do your own research?
I did my own research. Okay. I Googled everything, and that does not help.
No, it doesn't, because one of the biggest problems that physicians and nurses, to that matter, when nurses are heavily involved in the diagnostic side and then also the treatment side, is Dr. Google is a barrier. I had a personal experience years ago. Of all things, I ended up with shingles in my ear that resulted in facial slumping, crazy condition. Before I left the office, the doctor, who's brilliant, I think he's one of the most intelligent internal medicine doctors I've ever met, he looked at me and he said, "McDougall, do not Google this." And I said, "What am I going to find if I Google it?" And he said, "I'm not telling you, but don't Google it." So, of course, I Googled it.
Yeah.
There's a 50% chance that I will not have a full recovery from this facial slumping, the Bell's palsy that I was experiencing. It's crazy stuff out there. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. But, patients now are so bombarded with information that's readily available. It's not reliable. And God help us with all of the medication commercials that are on TV. Right. I mean, these musical commercials, I hit the mute button because I don't want to listen to it. I don't need to see, an episode of Hairspray promoting a pharmaceutical product.
Yeah.
But that's what these physicians are dealing with, where patients are coming in and telling them, and I did it to a doctor yesterday.
Sure.
I've been fighting my IT band in my left hip. I'm a runner, and I've been fighting it for 6 months. I finally gave up and went to see a doctor about it. And when he walked in, he said, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And I blurted it out, and I stopped myself, and I looked at him. I said, "Forget I said that." But when he asked me what was going on, I said, "I've got a problem with my IT band." And it's, and I proceeded to explain to him what my diagnosis was. And I stopped myself and I said, "Hey, You went to school for this. So, and you're highly experienced in sports medicine and orthopedic surgery. I'm going to shut up for a second. I want you to forget I said that. Tell me what's wrong with me. Yeah. And by the time I walk out of the office, yes, I have an IT band issue, but I was only partially right because the majority of my pain is the bursa sac on my hip, which the IT band is irritating. So thank God that he was smart enough to ignore my diagnosis and come up with the correct diagnosis. But I think physicians get this fear in their head. So if a patient comes in and says, I know what's wrong with me and I need Eliquis, they have a fear of not giving the patient the Eliquis unless it's just bad for the patient. So, you know, the Dr. Google piece is a challenge. So how did you, what kind of response did you get when you went into the physician's office and said, you know, what you had learned? How did they respond to that?
So, you know, for our situation, you have to understand it was from number one, recognizing something was not physically right with my mom, sending her to the emergency room. While she's in the emergency room, they find the tumor. From there, she is sent downtown to our hospital, where now she's in a room and there is a question about this tumor that's in her brain. So right there, it's your life, as the saying goes, flashes before your eyes.
Sure.
We didn't have a moment at that time to even Google anything because it was the unknown.
Oh, it's devastating news.
Devastating. And sometimes, Tom, I think the inability to Google is just as bad as the ability, because your brain begins to connect dots. You begin to automatically assume things based on nothing but feelings and emotions. So we begin navigating this process. So let me tell you what really set us off on, for me, the worst experience that has kind of sparked my desire to make a difference in this industry. She's in the hospital. They've done tests. We're just waiting for results. It's like 4 a.m. We're asleep. Some nurse that we've never met walks in our room, cuts the lights on bright, begins yelling my mother's name, waking her up, and says, good morning. I am so-and-so. You're at so-and-so hospital, and you have cancer, right? And she yells this to a woman who is sound asleep. Now, Tom, understand, we have received no results from any official test. We have spoken to 0 doctors. All my mother has done has been admitted because they have found a mass. They have done scans. We're waiting for the return. And a nurse walks in. And so I have to step in at this point, and I have to correct a healthcare professional. Understand, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not addressing a medical prognosis. But what I am addressing is a bedside manner to a family, because you're giving information, number one, that you have no knowledge to. She didn't know any test. She was under an assumption of why we were in that room. So that began the entirety. And there are so many little moments through my experience, Tom, that we don't even have time to talk about today, through my experience that are just like this throughout the entirety of the time. So to bring that back around full circle, as we're learning and as we're growing through this process, and then we begin weekly treatments, weekly checkups, all these things. So when I'm saying we're going to a doctor's office and we're continually being asked the same questions, we're going through the same processes, and I feel as if now I have to have all the answers. I'm not saying we're doing this once a month or every few months. I'm saying we're doing this multiple times a week, okay? So in Googling, here's why I felt like it was so important for me. This was not so that I could tell the doctor what to do, but I felt like I had to be prepared so that the doctor didn't miss something important. Because I was being asked so many questions that I needed to be prepared to give answers to which I felt if I did not understand or if I did not know, because I was being asked so much from the healthcare professional, that I had to be prepared to know or understand any pieces of information that they may miss. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
I did not want them to miss the care of my mom simply because I didn't know and because I wasn't prepared. And the only reason I felt that way is because I was being asked. And if I couldn't give an answer, it was like, well, we'll just see what happens. And so for me, that I know there are different reasons we want to know and we want to kind of see what the outcome is. But for me, it was a different experience of I'm just trying to do the best I can to care for someone that I love, and I want them to have the best care. So I just felt as much responsibility and as much weight, almost as if I was a doctor or a healthcare professional myself.
Yeah, you felt like you had to be prepared,
That's right.
or something may be missed, which
That's
is
right.
troubling. So, that's interesting. So the healthcare industry, while Dr. Google has become disruptive, the healthcare industry is almost creating the necessity for Dr. Google because of the way the communication's occurring. So that's a great lesson for all of us. I want to go back to something you said because I've got a real curiosity about this. You had a shocking experience in the middle of the night with the blurting out of you have cancer.
That's right.
Okay. And my reaction as a former hospital CEO, my reaction was, well, that wouldn't have happened in my organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a question for you. I know you've told this story to a lot of people.
That's right.
Was your experience unusual?
No,
That's what I figured you were going to tell me.
not at all.
I think this happens more often than it should. And I think it's happening in organizations and people don't realize it's happening, or you don't want to believe it. I've written books. I'm a weird, you may not know this about me. I'm this weird economics nerd, really weird. And, traditional economics and behavioral economics. Okay. And I have just, over the last 15 years, I have just become so struck with how our biases affect us. Mm-hmm. And the two biases of hindsight bias and heuristic bias, they're affecting us every moment of every day. So, of course, hindsight bias is I have a bias based off of what I've experienced. Mm-hmm. Heuristic bias, I have a bias based off of what I may not have experienced it, but I believe it, or I think I know what I know. But that, those two pieces are at play all the time, and they're at play both on the healthcare provider side as well as the patient side.
Sure.
So I'm sure you experienced that as well, where there just felt like, there was already a treatment determined before the diagnosis was complete.
That's right. Well, and to think about that perspective, that train of thought, exactly what you said. How many people will wait until they have to go in an ambulance instead of just going for precautionary things because here's what they say. I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't want to sit there forever. I don't want to fill out all of those forms. I don't want to answer all of those. If it were a better experience for an individual, we have the best healthcare in the world. I am grateful for our healthcare providers and all the resources and knowledge and medicines, all the things that we have. It's a miracle. So if we have all of this at our disposal, then why are we so hesitant to use it? And the only common factor is simply, for lack of a better term, the customer experience. And I would say in that, because yes, my experience, and I share this in a lot of organizations as an example of understanding the humanity of people and taking care and serving people. But here's the breakdown. I'm not picking on doctors today or nurses or healthcare professionals. Here is what I am sort of picking at, though. The systematic approach and the foundation in which their culture is developed. Doctors, nurses, they're overworked, they're understaffed, they are pushed hard, they're short on time, they are overrun. And so what happens is, in order to keep up and to hit their metrics and to do all the things that they're supposed to do, they're not given a lot of margin for time to truly care for people in the way that people should be cared for. And so the whole culture of it just does not lend itself to customer service or to a customer service experience, if that makes sense.
It does.
So they're fighting a battle internally as well. Just as we feel it on the outside, they're experiencing it on an internal scale as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They are. And it's because so many times the provider is paid, it's called a fee for service model in healthcare. So you're paid a fee for each service you provide. So
That's right.
With inflationary pressure, cuts that
Sure.
physicians have experienced in terms of their reimbursement, they have to do more. They have
That's
to
right.
generate more fees off of more services. And so
Certain medications to be prescribed and all those things.
Yeah, and a lot of times they agree with the patient on what the patient's experiencing or expecting. I'm a big believer that we have a significant problem with antibiotics being overprescribed in our country, but I don't fault the providers because the patient asked for it, and they may have a bacterial infection. Or a virus. Well, the antibiotic's great for the bacterial infection. It's not going to do anything to the virus, but the patient asked for it. And the provider is worried about a bad review, or they're worried about the patient experience scores. And so there's got to be this new approach. I think somehow the healthcare organizations have to figure out, how do we tell a patient no without ticking them off? But you bring up a great point of time. You don't have time to sit there and have this long educational debate with the patient to inform them why, even though they're asking for the antibiotic, it's not good for them.
Yeah. But Tom, on the other side of that, just as someone who is looking at this from the care perspective, do you think, and this is just me asking in your train of thought, do you think if an individual felt more confidence in their healthcare provider, of them spending time with them, seeing them as a person, actually hearing to listen instead of hearing to respond, that they may place more value in them saying, this is not what you need. Let's do this first, and then let's go from there. You're asking for this, and I understand why. If I really feel like that I have this connection with this individual, that they're really caring for me and see me as an individual, then I tend to think, and I could be completely wrong, but I feel like people may be more open to trusting the healthcare provider.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's data out there that conflicts right now because more than 80% of patients that have been surveyed in multiple research studies out there, more than 80% say they want a relationship with the physician that's taking care of them. They want that, but the environment creates barriers for that to actually occur. So we're seeing, and that has stayed up, north of 80%. That's been there for decades. And it used to be even higher, where you'd have more than 90% of patients say they want a relationship with their healthcare provider, particularly their physician. But now we're seeing this massive increase in urgent care, where I've got a sister-in-law. She's extremely intelligent, very smart lady. She doesn't have a primary care doctor. If she has a need, she goes to urgent care. And a number of years ago, I was thinking about that statistic. More than 80% want a relationship with their primary care provider. I just asked her, I said, why don't you have a primary care physician? And she's she's 50-ish now, so she's reached that point. And she said, why do I need one? Because I don't, when I did have a primary care provider, I didn't feel like they knew me. So I might as well go to urgent care, and then I don't need an appointment, and it's just as easy. So I don't know how we get off this turning wheel of how do we break this cycle. And I think, to your point, though, it has to be that connection that happens at the moment when the physician walks into the room. If you can establish the connection, the rest of it's going to go great.
Your sister-in-law answered it. She said, when I had a primary care physician, I did not feel like they knew me. So what did it matter? So the relational piece, we have technology, and we have, we have apps, and we have scheduling, and we have all of these amenities where we have convenience of these supposed to be really fast healthcare, go in, get an appointment, you're in and you're out. We all know that's not true. If you look at some of the chains, the largest ones, their customer reviews are horrible. There is no positive, but they are what's on the corner. Yeah. And so I believe when culture shifted, I can remember even when I was a kid, everyone had a primary doctor. This is who you go to. And the benefit is they know you, they see you, they've met with your family, they've taken care for generations. It's this relational healthcare. So what we've done is we've replaced all of these things for convenience. So we said, okay, we're going to pop up an emergency. You can go to the doc in the box anytime. They're on the corner, every corner, and you don't have to worry about the appointments. But what we've done is we've lowered the standard of relational care. We've become a number of people who can be processed through a quick healthcare center. And no longer is it quick, and no longer is the quality of care at a high standard. Yeah. So today what we've done is we've replaced our primary care doctors, and now someone like me, I can't find one. I can't find a primary care doctor. Huh. And if I look for one, they're full. They've taken the max number of patients that they can take. And so what we've done is we've replaced, I believe, one model with another. We've taken a fast food sort of chain model to it. And we have just eliminated the ability to have primary care. I am, as an individual right now, I'm in search for a primary care doctor because I now am at a stage of my life where I want someone to be on top of everything that could be wrong, and I want preventative care. I want them to know me. I want them to, the same person to see me every time I go so they can monitor my health as I age so that I can be as healthy and live as long as I possibly can. And I'm not going to get that from a street corner healthcare provider. They have a different purpose. They were never intended to be our extended care partner for the life of the health of our life. So I just think we've just culturally, we've created this chaos in this industry. And unless we're intentional with it, we're not going to get ourselves out of it. But I look at things very different. I don't think there's a problem. I think there's a possibility. There's potential here. Just what you said about Google and the struggles that doctors now have with people coming in and they've already, determined what's wrong with them and what their plan of action needs to be. Instead of looking at that and going, well, that's a barrier, we have a huge problem. Why not take that as an opportunity to serve that and to turn that into a positive? If you already know what's happening, if you know that the pain point is there, well, then all we have to do is get creative and come up with a solution to the pain point that is obviously touching every person. And so through that, I think we can transform the industries that we have.
Yeah. Well, and the rest of this piece of the puzzle is the financial piece. So the lack of connection with the patient by the primary care provider or the access to the primary care provider is pushing patients to go to urgent care.
That's right.
And urgent care is more expensive for the same care provided. So the average cost to the insurance company and a lot of times the self-insured employer is higher because the patient doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't have a relationship with a primary care physician. So the expense is greater when they go to the urgent care. So it's just this, I don't know, we have this circular inference that somehow it's got to start getting broken. But to your point, if the relationships were reestablished, then we're good. Things can start reversing back. And, to my example yesterday, the orthopedic surgeon, I felt like he cared about me as a person.
That's great.
And, before the visit was over, I had agreed to his treatment plan, which I generally am a little stubborn on those areas. I had agreed to his treatment plan. I had agreed to go to physical therapy, which I didn't want to do when I walked in the door. Yeah. And I agreed to go back and see him in 3 weeks. The one resource that is more valuable to me than anything, including money, is time. So he got more of my time because I felt like he cared about me as a person. He was genuinely concerned in the pain in my hip. He wanted it fixed. And I did things I wasn't planning on doing because of that. So I think everything you're sharing is real. And I think it does make a big difference. All right. I want to pivot to one other thing and go to something that you said in social media that got my attention.
Okay.
So I follow you in social media. So what you said is that leaders have a responsibility to delegate, delay, or drop. And I know this is an ongoing problem. And my wife, she's a charge nurse in a surgery center, and we just had a conversation about this last week where, everything she can do, she needs to do unless it can be delegated. And if it can be delegated, she needs to delegate it so she can focus on the things nobody else can do.
That's right.
So talk about that and talk about how you advise organizations to essentially retrain their management staff on how to handle this.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important for the long-term success of any leader or any organization, because number one, every person has a capacity. So you're only going to be able to do so much. We all know that. Oftentimes we become so passionate about what we do. We have, especially when you are a driven person and you're a person of excellence, you want it to be done as well as it can be done, and you have a standard. And oftentimes most people will never meet the standard that you have for yourself. So we're reluctant to give things away. So what that does is it caps our ability to achieve more or to do more. Whatever your ceiling may be, as high as that ceiling may be, that's all you're going to do. So I believe by empowering others, that's the definition of leadership. It really is empowering other people, I believe, both professionally and personally. And so as a leader, if you can delegate something, and I say it this way, if someone can do something 70% as good as you can do it, and you can delegate that, and they understand the heart, the mission, the vision, the passion behind it, and can achieve the outcome, they can grow into the other percentage points of where you need them to be. If you need them at 80% to be happy, or 90% or 100, they can grow to meet your standard, but you have to be able to give them a starting point. So you need to delegate some things. There are some things that we do because we're so driven that we start to do it today, and it gets in the way of the bigger things, the most important things. And I think we're all guilty of that. That's how we kind of get in the weeds or we get off course. Many organizations will find themselves driven toward one thing, but there may be a good opportunity that comes into play. It's not a great opportunity, so they sacrifice the great for the good. And what should have been done is they should have delayed that until a better time, or till they were more prepared to take a hold of it. And there are some things that some leaders just need to drop altogether, because it's hindering you from doing all the things that you could be doing to your fullest extent or your full capacity. So I think the important thing for leaders and organizations really is, and I say this to every leader, manager, or owner, is to invest in your team. People are the greatest asset that you have. The people are the conduit of your culture. So what you give to them is what they're going to give away. So all the things that you're wanting to reproduce through delegation, the things that you're wanting to accomplish, if you can take those three elements and prioritize, but empower people around that, you can create people who can achieve far more than you could ever do on your own. And so leaders, I think it's all about people. Many businesses or organizations, we think about the bottom line as profit, but really it's people who produce the product. It's people who sell it. It's people who deliver it, people who service it. Ultimately, people are the source. And if you invest in your people, the profit will follow. And so I think in all of that, in that question, is just prioritizing around, hey, what can be delegated? And what needs to be delayed? It's not right now. And what needs to be dropped altogether? And how do we encourage our team to rally around this so that every person can be doing what's important and giving it their absolute best?
Makes total sense. Okay, so here's the big hairy question, though, because I'm guessing a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they are struggling with one thing. Okay. It's this realization that I have problems. Either I know about the problems or I may have problems I'm not aware of. So here's my question for you. How do they get started? Because culture is huge. is
That's right.
huge. And changing a culture is a monumental challenge. Tweaking a culture is a monumental challenge.
That's right.
So, how do you advise companies where do you start? How do you get started on this journey?
To me, and this sounds simple, and it's not a pitch, but it starts with someone who does what I do to partner with. And I think it's important. And here's why. Number one, you may want the change, but most of our managers or leaders, HR, whomever in whatever size of organization has these resources, they just don't have time. They're already overloaded. They don't have time to slow down to really have that conversation with that individual. Sometimes they're so fast paced, like our doctors, room to room, patient to patient. They have to care for so many. They don't have the time always just to slow down and see the person. But number one, when you bring someone in, it's like your best friend telling you something, and it becomes a revelation to you, but your parents have been telling you for a year. Can you remember when you were young and you go, so-and-so told me this, and your parents said, I've been telling you that for months, and you won't listen to me.
You're never a prophet in your own land.
That's right. So when you invest and bring someone in, it's just a different perspective. It's an authority coming in that has no relational tie to the problems inside the organization. So number one, I think it becomes another voice to reinforce your culture, your desired culture. Number two, it communicates to your team that it's valuable. When someone invests resources or time into something, it is a trigger to everyone else. Wow, this is really important. They've taken a day to bring someone in, to invest in us. This really does matter. They're not just saying they want a culture of change. They're really demonstrating this by investing in us. And then I think the third thing that really helps in just those small tweaks and bringing someone in is it creates accountability. Because when someone brings a system in and helps you restructure change, and I think you said it so incredible, in such an incredible way, that it's not overnight change, it is small tweaks. I think it happens slowly. It's an internal shift. But when someone comes in, it helps create another layer of accountability to the change that you're wanting to happen. So in our context of our conversation in healthcare, I think it's simple. Who carries the culture more than anyone else in a hospital or a doctor's office? It is all of the people who are on the front lines. Exactly. It's from the counter when you walk in, and that person looks at you and just slides a clipboard across and says, fill it out, sit down, we'll call you. Already, no one has lifted my spirits as a sick person. But what if someone was trained to smile, to look them in the eye and say, I'm sorry you're feeling bad. If you'll take care of this, we're going to get to you as soon as possible. Just from the front desk all the way back. And it takes pressure off of the doctor. The doctor doesn't have to go through all of these layers of, just these, greetings and the things. You're already feeling like you're valued even before the doctor gets there. So I would just say, I understand systematically we may not be able to change the entire machine, but we can change some of the processes that take place. And I think we start with the people who are the most key in carrying that culture and reaching more of the touch points that every customer or patient would have through the process.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think every healthcare provider is in some kind of competitive environment. Yeah. And they are trying to differentiate themselves from the competitor. And you've just given them a roadmap of the differentiation.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about volumes and revenue if you are better at this than your competitors.
I will wait longer. I will wait another hour or 30 minutes. I will stretch out my time to sit in an environment where I am happy to be there.
Yeah, where you are valued. That's right. The most important thing. All right. So tell me about the return on investment that some of your companies have experienced.
Absolutely.
How you've helped them, because we got to get down to the brass tacks. Okay.
That's right.
So you got to spend money. So how are they seeing a return on investment from investment in the work that you are doing with them?
The greatest thing that I could say, just to narrow it down for time, is retention. I think retention is one of the most baseline outcomes. For example, when you create this environment for people who work for you, who are in the grind every single day, you retain the people who are there. because you've created an environment not just for the people that you serve, but you create an environment for the people who are doing the serving, who are doing the work. So what I see is when we can help make even the tiniest shift in the internal culture. Someone says, this may not even be the best environment, but it's better than the other places that I could go work. They're at least trying. So retention internally is one. And then secondly, it's the retention of the customers that they serve. Because when you feel that difference internally, immediately you feel it externally. The key to the best customer experience or customer service is just caring for people. That really is. So if you care for people internally, they're going to feel it on the outside. So one of the most common things that I hear is that our experience from the inside to the outside shifts and change. Therefore, it has slowed some of the, the turnover that we have with our clients or the turnover that we have with our staff. And that alone, it's more expensive to gain a new employee than to keep one. We
Absolutely.
all know that. So
Yep.
You're saving time and you're saving cost just on the internal retention. So I really focus on that aspect. And obviously that increases the bottom line, profitability, all of those other things. But again, it's the simplicity of going to the baseline of how do we keep our people and how do we keep our customers? And if we can do that and create a good experience for everyone, well, then the bottom line grows as well.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely impactful. Okay, so Brandon, tell people how to find you and how to find your podcast.
Yeah, I would love to connect. BrandonMatthews.com has all the links to everything. You can find the podcast there, my socials there. You can find out more about what I do. And I'm just passionate. I say bringing meaning back to the marketplace. People spend a third of their lives working. And Tom, people are miserable Monday through Friday. And we work our week away. We're looking for the weekend. The weekend doesn't last long enough. Monday's here again. And one day we wake up and we think, where did life go? But what if we could change everyone's day-to-day experience and change the life of where we work, how much more fulfilled, passionate, and productive we would be if we look forward to Monday instead of dreading it. And I'm just crazy enough to believe that the people who want to see that in their organization can see that happen. And I would love to help somebody do that.
That's amazing. And it's Brandon Matthews with 2 T's in Matthews. So that's how to find him. Mind Your Business podcast is fantastic. Hey, Brandon, I knew this was going to be a great episode. Thank you so much for sharing time with us today.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Badlands podcast. As always, please like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you have suggestions for topics or guests, please email those to podcast@badlands.pro. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. Some information shared may include fictitious names. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and/or guests and are their own and not reflective of the opinions of others or our sponsors. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Healthcare Badlands podcast. Until then,